Before we start, if you're new here, this channel is where history stops being a school subject and starts being the most insane story you've ever heard. Hit subscribe and drop a like. It takes 2 seconds and it means everything for a channel like this. All right, let's go. The year is 480 BC. A messenger arrives at the Persian royal court, and what he carries in his hands is not a weapon. It's a list of every kingdom, every city, every nation that has already surrendered to the Persian Empire without a single drop of blood. The list is long, very long. Greece is not on it. And Xerxes, the most powerful man on earth, the man who commanded over 300,000 soldiers, cannot understand why. So he sends his own messengers to Greece. The message is simple. Kneel, offer earth and water as a symbol of submission, and you will live. Most cities comply. Two do not, Athens and Sparta. And when the Persian messengers arrive in Sparta to deliver the ultimatum, King Leonidas doesn't write a response. He doesn't negotiate. He looks at the messenger and throws him into a well. The well is 300 feet deep. That was Sparta's answer. What happened next is one of the most extraordinary moments in the entire history of warfare. 300 men against 300,000, a narrow mountain pass against the largest army ever assembled. And somehow, and for 3 days, the 300 held. This is the story of Thermopylae. And I promise you, the Hollywood version doesn't even come close to the real thing. To understand why Thermopylae matters, you need to understand what Persia was. This was not just another empire. Under Xerxes and his father Darius before him, Persia had swallowed civilizations whole. Egypt, Babylon, Lydia, Thrace. From the borders of India to the shores of the Aegean Sea, the Persian Empire was the largest the world had ever seen. When Xerxes decided to invade Greece, he wasn't going on a military campaign. He was going on a coronation march. He expected Greece to simply kneel. The Greek city-states knew what was coming. Scouts reported the size of the Persian force moving west, and the numbers were staggering. Ancient sources speak of over 1 million men. Modern historians place the number closer to 200 to 300,000. Either way, it was a force so massive that when they marched, they reportedly drank rivers dry. The Greek response was fragmented, panicked, uncertain. Many cities had already surrendered before a single Persian boot touched their soil. Greece was falling apart, and Persia hadn't even arrived yet. The Greek generals knew they could not fight Persia on an open field. The numbers were impossible. But the geography of Greece, its mountains, its coastlines, its narrow passes, offered something rare, a chance to neutralize the Persian numbers. If they could find the right bottleneck, they could force Xerxes to fight a small battle instead of a large one. And the perfect bottleneck was a narrow coastal pass on the eastern edge of central Greece, a place called Thermopylae. In Greek, it means the hot gates, named for the thermal springs that bubbled nearby. In the summer of 480 BC, it would earn a very different kind of heat. Leonidas was not a young king. He was around 60 years old when he led his men to Thermopylae, and he had spent his entire life training for exactly this kind of moment. Every Spartan male was taken from his family at the age of 7 and placed into the Agoge, one of the most brutal military training programs ever conceived by human beings. For the next 13 years, boys were starved, beaten, exposed to the cold, forced to fight one another, taught to endure pain without expression. By the time a Spartan male reached adulthood, he was not simply a soldier. He was a machine built for one purpose: to kill and not die. Leonidas chose his 300 personally, and here is something the movie gets right, but for the wrong reasons. He didn't pick the strongest. He picked men who already had sons, men who had already produced heirs, because Leonidas knew, with absolute clarity, that none of them were coming back. This wasn't a defensive mission. This was a calculated sacrifice. 300 men to buy Greece the time it needed. 300 men to show the other city-states that resistance was possible. 300 men to light a fire in the soul of a civilization. They were not alone at Thermopylae. Leonidas brought roughly 7,000 allied Greek soldiers with him: Thespians, Thebans, Arcadians, Corinthians. But the 300 Spartans were the core, the spine, the force around which everything else would hold. When they arrived at the pass and saw the terrain, they understood immediately why this place had been chosen. At its narrowest point, Thermopylae was only about 15 meters wide, barely enough for a handful of men to stand side by side. It was the perfect killing ground. When Xerxes first saw the Greek force at the pass, he reportedly waited 4 days. 4 days, expecting them to run. They didn't move. So on the fifth day, he sent his first wave. The Medes, elite infantry, hardened veterans. What happened next shocked the entire Persian command. The Medes charged, and the Spartans retreated. It looked like a rout. And then the Spartans turned, in perfect unison, and they butchered every single one of them. The feigned retreat was an ancient Spartan tactic, and it worked with terrifying precision. The Medes were cut down in the narrow pass, where their numbers meant nothing. Xerxes sent wave after wave. His immortals, the 10,000 elite Persian soldiers who had never known defeat, were thrown into the pass, and they died like everyone else. The Greek phalanx, that tight formation of overlapping shields and extended spears, was perfectly suited to the terrain. In the open field, Persian numbers and cavalry would have annihilated any Greek force. But in those 15 meters of rocky coastal path, a Spartan shield wall became something close to impenetrable. For 2 full days, the largest army the ancient world had ever assembled could not move forward 15 meters. Xerxes, sitting on his golden throne watching from a hillside, reportedly rose 3 times in fear during the battle. And then, on the second night, everything changed. A local Greek man named Ephialtes, and history has not forgotten his name, though not with kindness, approached the Persian camp. He knew something the Persians didn't. There was another path, a goat trail that wound through the mountains above Thermopylae, hidden, narrow, and entirely unguarded. For a price, he offered to show them. Xerxes sent his immortals through the mountain path overnight. When dawn broke on the third day, the Greeks found themselves surrounded. When Leonidas received word that the pass had been flanked, he called a war council. Most of the allied Greek forces, the Thespians, the Thebans, the Arcadians, were ordered to retreat and live to fight another day. Greece would need them, but the 300 Spartans stayed, and in a gesture that is almost incomprehensible in its quiet courage, the Thespians stayed too. 700 men who had no obligation to die, who simply refused to leave. They would fight alongside the Spartans to the end. Their names are almost never remembered. They deserve to be. The final stand is the part that defies rational explanation. Leonidas led his men out of the narrow pass, out into slightly wider ground, and charged, not defended, charged. They drove deep into the Persian lines, fighting with a fury that ancient accounts say bordered on madness. Some historians believe Leonidas was trying to kill Xerxes himself, that the final charge was a targeted assassination attempt on the Persian king. Whether that's true or not, the Persians were so rattled that 2 of Xerxes' own brothers died in the fighting. When Leonidas finally fell, his men formed a ring around his body and defended it with everything they had left. In the end, the Persians had to resort to arrows. Wave after wave of volleys, raining down on the last survivors from every direction, because no Persian soldier was willing to step forward and finish it man to man. The Greeks fought until their spears broke, then their swords, then their hands and teeth, according to Herodotus. When it was finally over, Xerxes was so furious at the resistance and so rattled by the death of his brothers that he ordered Leonidas's head cut off and his body crucified. It was the only time in recorded history that Xerxes desecrated an enemy's corpse, because even in death, Leonidas had gotten to him. Persia took the pass. Persia marched into Athens and burned it to the ground. By every conventional military measurement, Thermopylae was a Persian victory, but something happened in those 3 days that no military calculation had accounted for. Greece woke up. The news of 300 men holding 300,000 for 3 days spread like fire through every city-state that had been paralyzed by fear. If Sparta could hold, resistance was possible. If Sparta could hold, Persia was not invincible. The Greek city-states stopped surrendering. They started fighting. Within months, the Greek navy, united for the first time, destroyed the Persian fleet at the Battle of Salamis. Without naval supply lines, Xerxes' enormous land army became unsustainable. He retreated back to Persia, leaving a force behind that was finally and decisively defeated at the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC. Greece survived. Western civilization, with its philosophy, its democracy, its science, its art, survived. And historians have debated ever since whether any of that happens without the 3 days at Thermopylae. At the site of the battle, the Greeks erected a stone monument. The inscription was written by the poet Simonides, and it is one of the most quietly devastating things ever carved into stone. It reads, "Go, stranger, and tell the Lacedaemonians that we lie here, obedient to their laws." No heroics, no drama, just a simple statement of duty. 300 men who were given an impossible task and simply did it. That stone stood at Thermopylae for centuries, and in a very real sense, it still stands there today. 300 men, 3 days. An empire that had never been stopped. Stopped. Not forever, but long enough. Long enough for Greece to remember who it was. Long enough for the world to change. The Battle of Thermopylae is not just a story about war, it's a story about what 300 people, fully committed, can do against something that looks completely impossible. And 2,500 years later, we're still talking about it. If you made it this far, thank you, genuinely. This channel is just getting started, and every single view, every like, every subscription is what keeps this going. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button right now. It makes an enormous difference for a new channel. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We're just getting started, and the stories don't get any smaller than this.